excited to be back with you here in December. The aim every year is to be playing football in December, and here we are. I think with a great opportunity in front of us, and that's all you want. Reflecting back on what seemed like a long time ago over in Missoula, I think we did enough to win that day. There was certainly plenty to correct. And with that being said, had a good week last week. Looking at both teams, obviously Yale prevailed on Saturday, so our focus completely shifted them on practice that we had late on Saturday, and we were back at it today. So, these opportunities we don't take lightly, and we're set up to be at home, but all we're guaranteed is this one game in front of us. So, saying that Yale brings in a very resilient team. Those type of comebacks that they had on Saturday don't come about for the faint of heart, for sure. How they got it done and how they put that together, at the core of it had to be a ton of belief, and then just making plays, kind of one play at a time, both offensively and defensively. And that game gets down to a 2-score game, 42-29. They make the plays on defense to get the ball back, and they score, and they do it again, and before you know it, they're up by 1, and they're able to close it out. So awfully impressive for them to win that game, and even going back a couple of weeks, awfully impressive for them to beat an undefeated Harvard team, to win the Ivy, to win the AQ. So they're certainly on a roll, winning 7 games in a row right now. And success for them starts on offense. Quarterback wise, Dante Reno is a really good quarterback. He's capable of making all the throws. Being a coach's son, I'm sure plays into his decision making, and just how he orchestrates their offense. And Josh Pitzenberger, they certainly have one of the best running backs in the country. Over 1,400 yards at this point, and in some ways he just kept getting better for sure on Saturday. And receiving core, I think, is a really dynamic group, and they were without their top receiver this past Saturday, and Nico Brown. So a lot of ways to threaten you on offense, and it does certainly start with the quarterback. Defensively, they're holding teams under 20 points to this point, and while Youngstown had some success certainly when they needed to get the stops, they kept getting them. And they play a lot of guys up front. They were playing without their best defensive end, number 2 Larry, in that game. So impressive what they did without him. I think their linebacking crew is 24, 8, and 4, I think, is the nickel. Those 3 are top tacklers and very active. So defensively, they do some really good things, and it does start with just the way they can roll guys in up front and make things challenging. So we're gonna have to play well. There's no doubt about that, and that's the charge this time of year, to keep upping our game. Our health is in a really good position at this point in time. We did lose J.J. Dolan for the season, so really unfortunate. J.J. was having a heck of a year for us, and was doing so many things, whether it was defense or special teams. But beyond J.J., we are as healthy as we could be at this point in time. So with that, I'll open it up, and again, excited for the opportunity to be playing ball.
The statement you released on Wednesday, I was wondering if you could speak any more on that.
Yeah, I think looking back at last week, this time of year is really complicated. You can see it happening all across the country. 25 overlapping with 26 as far as football teams. And there was certainly interest, I would say, on my part in looking at a different position, and that interest, by the time we got to really Tuesday, but then Wednesday, had gone away. So putting out a statement stating that we're moving forward with what we got going here was really the gist of it. I do appreciate the university stepping up with increased investment. I'll leave it at that. But this is complicated times. There's no real good clean way to navigate any of it. And I'm just excited to be here and coaching this team into December.
Yeah, the playoffs and just the program you've been with, I guess, what has been kind of the biggest reasons for wanting to be here as long as you have been now?
Well, that's it right there. I mean, our ability to have success, the support we get, while we're FCS, our support and the opportunity to win football games, coach great young men, is great here. It really is. And other places might have some more things on the periphery that people see, but as far as the guys we get to coach here, the opportunity to win games and win championships, and the support we get not only on Saturdays but throughout the year is what you're looking for as a head coach. And we need to keep pushing the envelope. I know that. We do want to sit still. I know that, and I hope that this commitment by me, and our players, almost brings on a renewed commitment by all those that want to support us.
With JJ going down, I guess shortly after Taki coming back, how do you kind of feel about the depth on the back end now?
Yeah, I think Taki's feet were underneath him for sure. And at the same time, I think Bryant still is that flex guy that can play both free and nickel. He's been doing it all year, as had JJ to some degree. Tim Thomas, who played in 4 games, we were able to redshirt him, becomes that next man up. I think Tim gained some really valuable experience. He played his 4th, and Taki was coming back, so we decided to, just to pump the brakes on him. But glad we did get him the experience that we did. I think Coulter Petrie's continued emergence, Mason Deathman's continued emergence at the strong safety just give us, 2 more, beyond able bodies in the safety room. I know we haven't had to play Caden anywhere but strong safety, but he certainly has flexibility as well. So still a pretty deep room. Again, hated to lose JJ because of just the year he had more on a personal note. He had such growth and had become such a key player for us.
What have you thought about just how the helmet communication has been this season? I know there were some bumps in the road early, but just I guess kind of last few weeks how that's going.
No, I think we've settled in. I think we've had our fair share of technical issues on our end, and that's just been disappointing. But I think we've worked through that, and I think both offensively and defensively, I think we've honed in the communication that we need, because too much is too much. I think certainly the play call, any particular instructions, whether it's been for Justin or then both Caden and Coulter have been the ones on the defensive side that have wore it. I think it's been good. I think our coaches have found a rhythm, and our players have become accustomed to it.
And just looking back at that win against the Grizz in a really hostile environment, your first victory at since 2018, how did what you guys did that day maybe set the tone for what you want to do in the playoffs now?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think we went and did something we hadn't done. I think if that's something in itself, and I think the way we went about it, we were really aggressive in our thinking. I think our players played with a lot of conviction, and you do that, you hope you can accomplish whatever's out in front of you. And not that we had a lot of guys have to grow up on that setting, but a lot of guys had to step up at the very least. And I don't think anybody backed down from the challenge, and in a setting that can make some teams melt down. We didn't do that whatsoever. I think we kept taking it on and ultimately prevailed. And I think just functionally as an offense in particular, we did not play on our heels. We were aggressive all day. We ran our offense. We didn't let the environment dictate much of anything, honestly. And that's, whether we're going to have a chance to play at home here, so we might not get ourselves in that type of environment again. But there'll be moments in time when it might seem like we can't accomplish something. And I think going over there and accomplishing what we did with the factors was definitely a big step.
Defensive.
Sure.
Just defensively in that game, getting a couple stops and then they seeming to adjust with a lot of short passing, and that's something you guys have done all season, keeping stuff in front of you. How did you just feel like the evolution of that went and your guys' ability to ultimately get a stop when with the flat field goal?
Yeah, I think, that's been who we've decided to be. Keep the ball in front of us. Tackle real well. Now, we didn't tackle great all day. I know that. That was really the missing ingredient, and certainly credit goes to their players as well. But we, again, played a game that was very disciplined for the most part, and guys doing their jobs for the most part. And I think that's the level of defense that we want to play. And if that means we're going to give some things here and there, so be it. Make teams ultimately really earn it. And, while they did earn it a few times, they didn't earn it enough ultimately on that day. So I think that's I think credit goes to our coaches for continuing to instill the belief in our guys that, just keep playing, keep trusting the call, keep doing your job, and we'll find a way.
And I know there's a lot of ingredients to go to being able to prevent big plays and keep everything kind of in front of you. How much of just the front six and being able to not have to throw another defensive back in the box help that?
No, I think it's been a big part of it. Our front, that's where it all starts. And, we don't have to manufacture regular down pressure in particular and put ourselves at high risk a whole lot. I mean, we'll take our chances here and there, but for the most part, we can play protected defense because our front can get the job done. With six, and then there's a seventh guy involved all the time. It's just where it's coming from changes. Whether that's a safety, a nickel, a corner. We're getting a seventh hat there all the time, and then even an eighth. But it's our ability to continue to mix up the looks, disguise it, that has been the key. And really everybody being able to tackle. I think that's a big part. When everybody on your defense can tackle, you don't have a weak link out there as far as a position group that can't tackle. I think that gives you a really good chance to play defense the way we are. So.
And, Coach, this season's had some ups and downs, but what have you learned about this team through the first 12 games? Well,
I think it's a group that it's hard to satisfy, I guess. I think that's where I would go, and that's what you want. While we've accomplished some things, I think it's a group that's still hungry. So, it's easy for a young group to feel like they've arrived at a lot of different points in time this season, and they just haven't. That's not how they've looked at it. I know. I think they truly believe each week they come back and they look at that film and say, well, we can play better. And that's when you have that, you got a team that can continue to evolve. And we talked about it this morning. It's December 1st. The goal is not just to play in December. Well, we're here, but that's not just the goal. The goal is to advance in December. And I think the mindset that we've carried forward to this point has to continue to allow us to do that. But just to continue to hunger and I think be happy about our performance, but it's time to move on to the next one and hungry more so for what we can do moving forward than what we've done in our past.
And Coach, about deep playoff runs. You have some guys on the team that know about deep playoff runs, but for the players that are getting their first taste of this, kind of what's the message ahead of the first game of the playoffs?
Yeah, I think it's we don't need to change who we've been. It's still, what do we need to do to win the game in front of us, and that's what all you're guaranteed. So it's not like all of a sudden we're trying to win 4 games at a time. We're not guaranteed more than one. So what do we have to do? Look back each week how we've gone about our business and went through just our preparation and allow that to carry us forward against whoever the next opponent is. So saying that, it's still that same mindset. It's about the opportunity versus the opponent. Very fortunate we get a chance to play here in Bozeman, and Yale's that next one up.
Coach, you mentioned their run game. I think they were down 28 points, and their running back had 30-plus carries in that game. Shows their commitment to it. How do you kind of minimize that part of the game to make Reno kind of win over the Czar?
Well, we got to be able to tackle them. I think they got a good offensive line. They got a good scheme. We have to be assignment sound, and we got to be able to tackle them. I think there was a couple breakouts for him where it was guys not getting in their fit. In particular, the last one, the 50-plus yard one, there should have been a guy right there. It should have been an opportunity for them to tackle him for a 2-3 yard gain. And, for whatever reason, Youngstown's discipline escaped him in that moment. So it's the same ingredients that have allowed us to really slow run games down all year. And wherever he stacks up, I'm sure he's near the top. And just make them earn it. And ideally, get them behind the chains where they can't run it on all 3 downs. A big part of them being able to run the ball in the second half was Youngstown not staying on the field. And, Youngstown stays on the field at all from the middle of the third quarter on, that the run game side of it goes away. But, credit to Yale, they found a way to get him off the field, to provide those opportunities. They were able to score quick and, bounce right back, get another opportunity. So he's good though, he is, and they got a good RPO game off their run game. So, and Reno runs that very well. So it's a delicate balance about what we need to take away, and it first needs to be the run game, and then really challenge the RPO game.
With Yale's defense, is there anything specific you've seen in the last couple games against Harvard and Youngstown that stand out?
I don't know. I think they're certainly sound. They are willing to dial up pressure though, and roll the dice at the same time. So, how they defended Youngstown was probably different than how they defended the Ivy, and I do think that's in part because Youngstown's quarterback in particular was a tough ask for a defense. And while they gave up some things, they really bottled them up when it mattered the most. So they did that by, again, being sound, being where they were supposed to be, and then being willing to dial up pressure in obvious passing situations. So it's for us being able to control the line of scrimmage. That's where it starts. And then if we're in obvious passing situations, we have to really be in tune with their pressures, and Justin's got to be able to get the ball out quick.
And then just one more on the helmet communication. I know Caden, obviously team captain, greened up, but any specific reason for Coulter?
Just keep it with the same position.
Gotcha.
I think defensively, what we found early is, Neil had it, and then we were going to roll linebackers, and if Neil was out of the game, how was that going to look without having musical helmets on the sideline? So, going to the strong safety position just made the most sense, and little to do with Caden being the captain by any means. It was just, he was going to be out there, and if he wasn't, it was going to be Coulter, and just trying to, have a functioning situation where we won't have guys switching helmets all the time on the sideline.
Speaking of Caden, Defensive Player of the Year, Justin, newcomer, and then your third Coach of the Year. Any thoughts on those and the other all-conference selections?
Yeah, I think, Caden certainly, what he did over the last 3 weeks, really, winning the Player of the Week each one of those weeks, making the plays he made, I think was an extension of how he had played in the first 9 games. The ball found him, obviously, in those 3 games as far as the interceptions go, but, he positioned himself well to win that award, and, certainly really proud of him for that. And again, it's not about just those 3 weeks to me, it's about what he did all season. Justin winning the newcomer, obviously his impact on our program, beyond significant. I know he had to be kind of right there, for the offensive player, but he didn't get that, and there was a bunch of good candidates for that. So, I think Justin's impact in winning that award, in this day and age, to win newcomer, I mean, that is a good award, though. I mean, when you think about it, just all the different newcomers that people bring in, whether it's transfers or freshmen that haven't seen the field yet. So I'm excited about that, and I think the fact that we won our 3rd championship, I think that coincides with the Coach of the Year. So I think that's definitely a team award reflective of our ability to go through the season undefeated in the conference. And I think the all-conference team, I don't know, I think we had 5 first-teamers, 1 on offense, 3 on defense, and then 1 on the special teams. I think that kind of reflects the type of team we have. We're more about our team. Our team is the star. I think that's the coolest thing about this group. Yes, we have some standouts. We have some standouts that deserve recognition and got it, whether it was first, second, or honorable mention, but I think our team is the star, and I think that's what everybody was after. And you know, sometimes you have teams that have these guys that have accumulated, like last year. We had a whole bunch of guys that had these long careers and kind of established themselves. We don't really have that this year. We have a younger team, and I think that reflected the number of guys we had selected.
Coach, this being the first time that Yale and Montana State played each other, what unique opportunities or challenges does that present for preparation?
I think the one thing, you know, when you play, I think in particular the East Coast conferences right now, is there's no real point of reference. There's no crossover. There gets to be some crossover with Missouri Valley. There gets to be some crossover, you know, with schools in the South. But you know, with the East Coast teams, there's really no crossover with our league. Period. So, you know, your ability to even compare scores is very, very limited. You know, certainly, you know, with the Ivy League playing in the playoffs for the first time, I know that was a big thing, and they had two teams make it. One won their game in Yale, and one didn't in Harvard. So I don't know. I think it's just the unknown of how, you know, how does this team, how would it stack up in the Big Sky? And they probably look at the same thing. How would we stack up, you know, over the course of their regular season? So let it play out on Saturday, and you know, again, excited for the opportunity.
Coulter, time's yours.
Hi, Coach. Can you hear me okay?
Gotcha. Yep.
Yeah, on that note, I mean, Yale's only played something like 30 opponents ever, because they've only ever usually played Ivy League teams, but they do have such a rich history with, you know, all these national championships and All-Americans and college football, Hall of Famers and stuff. So what do you think of this sort of having an opportunity to be a part of that history at such a storied school?
Yeah, you know, obviously the game of college football began in the Northeast, and Ivy League schools like Yale were at the core of it, and you know, their success in the early 1900s on the national scene was significant. And you know, while football maybe lived in a pretty small space in the grand scheme of things at that time in this country, they were still one of the preeminent programs. So, and I think, you know, as the Ivy League has continued to go on for many, many years without the playoffs, I do think they've still held on to a rich history. So now, you know, getting into the playoffs here, and by no means like settling the score or anything like that. I just think it's probably good for FCS football that that's not going to be this lingering question. And where does the Ivy League fit? That probably has been a question for a long, long time. So, you know, the playoffs at our level, you know, really sort things out, and you know, excited for the opportunity to play them, and again see how the Montana State, the Big Sky, matches up with that conference.
Well, in general, this time of year is always fun on our side, because we get to learn about all these different schools and different programs and stuff. It seems like a great opportunity though for your football program to have, you know, a national platform, to be on national TV, all these different things. So what do you think of just that opportunity for Montana State?
Yeah, I think you know, as far as eyes on the FCS playoffs, if adding the Ivy League adds some more eyes, I think that's a good thing. I do think there's interest across the country. You know, the show that they ran is that on Thanksgiving? You know, I think that was a really well done show to highlight a bunch of different programs, highlight our rivalry with the University of Montana, but just shine the light a little bit brighter on the FCS. And I think as the FBS has gone to the playoff system, I think it's maybe even brought a little more attention, because I think just people's intrigue in what playoff football is and what it can be, I think has continued to grow. So for us to be here for this game to be played in Bozeman, for us to continue to stack up these home games here, and you know, what is it's an amazing setting for college football. It'll be great to have more eyes, and you know, it's up to us to continue to create those opportunities as the weeks go on.
I know you talked about the win in Missoula and just the way that sort of sets the tone for the playoffs, but the fact that you played 2 of the top 8 seeds right before the playoffs started, how much does that help you sort of sharpen your sword, so to speak, going into the postseason?
Yeah, I think we come in you know, more battle tested than we would have, say, you know, 3-4 weeks ago. and we knew those games were sitting there at the end of our schedule all year. And I think, as a young team, I think our continued growth and not looking ahead through a stretch of the season was really significant. But then being able to answer the bell, both the evening against Davis and then the afternoon against Montana, I think, at minimum, let's say it propelled us in the position we are for sure. Without those 2 wins, we wouldn't be positioned the way we are. But I do think from a continued growth perspective of just who we are and who we can be, I think it's put us in a good spot. But we're at the point now. There's 16 teams left. Everybody has a clean enough slate where just you win in advance, and that's all we're after. I think your record to this point certainly does matter. Your seed does matter, but at the same time, it doesn't guarantee anything.
You made a comment a couple weeks ago of Justin Lamson being not at the same time fiery and steady. Does that come naturally to him, or is that something you guys worked on, or is it a combination of both? How do you get a guy that is out really fiery and also so even?
I think the steady part, he can be pretty mild-mannered away from competition, but within competition, he's really fiery. But at the same time, I think he knows he plays a position where he's got to have a level of control too. And I think now being the guy for 12 games, I think he's learned what that means. When you're a guy playing here and there, when you're maybe a situational quarterback, maybe wearing that fire on your sleeve and the sideline, maybe wasn't all that significant. But when you have to go back to a huddle or you have to go back to a sideline, you got to restore calm, all those things. I think he's learned how important that is. So that's where I think within any one of these games, he's been able to, let's say, catch his breath over and over again, and I think that's been important because I know our offense feeds off of both his intensity, but then also his focus and how intent he is, and those are 2 different things within the course of a contest. So a lot of credit goes just to, I think, of Justin, recognizing his role. I think certainly a lot of credit goes to Coach Sturbeck, the conversations they can have through the course of the game, and I've really been pleased with how he's managed his emotions, both being on fire at times, but then also being able to calm the waters.
One follow-up on Kate. He made a comment about his pick 6 in Missoula, where he said he recognized almost instantly that there was a mismatch in the slot, and he decided, okay, I gotta hedge my bets here. I gotta cheat one way or the other and sort of stay in the middle. It seems like that's an amazing thing to be able to process that so quickly. Do you think that's what a strength of his is, just being able to be so cerebral on the fly like that?
Yeah, that's been a strength since day one, and I know even thinking back to when he was in high school, I mean that was such a strong selling point for him from his coaches over at West is his intelligence, his ability to react appropriately within games and heat of the battle is who he is, and there's a lot that goes into that. There is a lot of film study, but I think some guys the game just comes more natural to than others, and I do think it comes pretty natural. So he could make in a split second there a decision that might be slightly outside the framework of his alignment, but he knew we were potentially in trouble with the mismatch, and he was Johnny on the spot for sure. The way that play played out.
When it comes, I know you mentioned Yale's running back, but he's a guy that really stood out to me watching that game on Saturday. And I mean, you look at his stats, got like 1,500 yards. So, do you think he stacks up with some of the running backs you've seen so far this year? Just your impressions of Fitz?
Yeah, I think so. He's 220. That's what he's listed at. He looks all of that. I know they kept referring to him as an NFL guy during the telecast, so I'm sure that those guys aren't just making that up. They probably had that information from whether it was the Yale side or whatever. He's got that workhorse type of body, and then he can go to the long run at the end. He ran away from Youngstown, and so he's he's got it all. He's got really good instincts. He's certainly hard for the first guy to bring him down. He's got good patience and good acceleration all at the same time. So yeah, he would stack up there. I know we've seen some bigger backs along the way. I'm not going to compare him to one guy or the other, but he's right up there with the best that we've seen.
Any other expectations just in terms of Yale? I mean, obviously you hear Yale, you think academic prestige, smart guys. So do you expect a smart, well-coached team to come to Bozeman?
Yeah, I think you naturally assume that, and then you flip the film on, and that's how they play. I think the one thing that's clear is they believe. You don't again rattle off 7 games, 7 wins in a row without believing, and they've you look at their last 3. That Princeton game was 13-10, and that could have gone either way, and that puts them in position to to be playing for the AQ against Harvard. They jumped on Harvard pretty quickly in that game, and then for the last week, for the last opportunity to go like it did, and somehow come out of halftime with enough belief to be able to say, okay, we can just stack a few things up. We're right there. Well, there's a lot of things to stack up in that game, that second half. There was a lot that had to go right for them. So I think, beyond I'd say the intelligence piece, they're a group that's going to fight and scratch and claw, and we're going to get everything they got. And I know they got to feel like they're playing with house money at this point too. So I know we're going to get their best shot, and they got ability, and they got a winning attitude for sure that they're going to bring to Bozeman.